We're going to start this off, and I'm going to bet $50. And somebody give me 60. I bet 50 and I want $60 on it with a 60 now, $70 on it with a 70. I bet 60 there and I want $70. Look at the 70, look at the 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, now 80. I bet 70, now I want $80. $80.
What size of hooks are underneath all of that buzz?
These are 2-aughts. See, what's going on now is we're going to saltwater hooks. A lot of people are starting to understand that, you know, in the salt, everybody's using those short shank, big open gapes. That same kind of hook applies to these kind of big fish too, with these big mouths. So like, why can a tarpon eat a fly this big but it's only got one hook? You know, the rest of these don't count because they always hit it from the head. So we started doing that here. And being that this is a short shank hook, you don't miss a lot of fish. And I will say this, you know, you get into these fat heads and some of these other flies, you know, that have these standard streamer hooks, like a 3X long, 5263, or just any kind of, you know, woolly booger hook, let's say. You know, you got a 2X long or a 3X heavy or a 3X long. Those hooks work, and they're doing a lot of these kind of flies, like these are fat heads, you know. And so these are, this is all Kelly Gallup stuff, these flies here. But if you notice these hooks, you know, this is a 93. Anybody know anything about TMPL hooks or anything like that, like styles and stuff? Well, a 93-95 and a 93-94 is the same hook. One's nickel plated, one's bronze, okay? But the thing about it is, I'm going to pass this around. I want you to look at the gape of that hook, okay? I want you to see, like, the bend, okay? Here, you guys can look at this one. Just look at these hooks, okay? And I want you to look at that bend. You see that bend? You see that? That's called a sproke bend. You see how it goes, ooh, and it hooks real hard? That's a bad hook. I don't think that hook really catches a lot of fish because of that gape not being real open. You know, if you notice saltwater hooks, short shank, real big gape. That gape is everything in these hooks. One thing I'll tell you too is like 5263, like, you know, woolly booger hooks that have a 3X long shank. Not only is the gape too small, but if you get into those longer hook shanks, it's going to act as a pry bar. So when you get a big old fish and he hits that, and he didn't hit it right because your shank's too long, then what happens is that flies in his mouth, but a lot of the other part of that hook is hanging out. So being that these fish like to run and turn, they're going to pop that hook a lot because of the angle of how that thing's sitting in their mouth. And it's just not a good hook set. And I've missed some big fish by using bad hooks, and it's just store-bought flies.
So you only use one hook?
No, I use a bunch. See, we can get away with three.
I mean on each fly.
No, I mean I like more hooks, but not because I want the hook to be part of the whole application of the fly. I want that hook. I know they're going to hit the front hook. Anything that hits the back hook, it's going to be a little fish.
Now you use monofilament between them?
I do. And here's what's funny. Kelly says to use that wire. That wire, I broke that wire a bunch. But I've never broke monofilament. That hard Mason 25 pound, I haven't broke it. So I'm kind of one of those guys, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'm not going to do it. But here's another hook I wanted to pass around too. I want you to look at this hook a little bit versus that last hook that I showed you guys. See, like, you know, this is a bass hook, you know, like a standard bass popper hook. But you just got a lot of gape there left for that fish to get on, you know. And when you start building these flies up, you just lose a lot of that because of the bulk. So, you know, they need to come out with like a popper hook, but it doesn't need to have so much of that sprout in there. You know what I mean? It just needs to be a long, wide gape.
So which hooks do you use?
I use this partridge hook. I don't have it with me. It's an old partridge hook, and they're called long shank. It's just called a long shank. It comes in a 2 and a 4. But they're so old that I don't know if I can even find them anymore. So I'm going to be like, when I get to that point. But I'll tell you what a lot of people are doing is they're going to bass hooks. They're going to Gamakatsu hooks. We're no longer getting into this whole, you know, traditional, you know, streamer hooks for single woolly boogers and stuff. That's what we had to work with, so that's what we tied on. But we're starting to realize, or I am for sure, is that the gapes are bad, you know. And I think that if we start incorporating like Gamakatsu bass hooks, stainless steel, they don't rust, you know. You don't wear your flies out. I mean, I've had a lot of flies. You get them sopping wet and you throw them, you forget about them, and you get them back and they're all rusted out. And so stainless steel is the way to go, especially with these flies, because you don't lose a lot of these flies unless you catch trees or hang the bank. You know, we're pulling tree limbs off trees because we're using 15 to 20 pound test lines. So.
That's the only place you throw, right?
Well, that's where accuracy starts to play a big role in this sport. Is you start realizing how important that accuracy is when you start losing about 10 flies in one day on trees.
You debarb?
I debarb when I have to, but I trust them. I want the barb because when you're dealing with fish that big, I mean, I've lost too many on barbless hooks.
Speaking of losing, what is your, do you have any landing rate versus hookup rate?
Well, here's the deal. When you get a guy that's never done it before and he gets on my boat and you go on a guide trip, we have the right water, which, you know, in order to really throw big streamers, you've got to have running water. If you're only dealing with 1 to 2 units of water, you're not going to push a lot of them to the banks. They can hang in the middle of the river, and that's where they're at. They're in the deepest part of the river, and a lot of boats are just not, you know, visibly seeing them because they're so far down deep, and they know where to go. I mean, there's so much pressure on this river that, you know, that's another thing. Like if you, let's say you go fish up top and you're fishing by Gaston's, that's just a bad idea for streamers because you're going to deal with pressure. So like in the winter, like this winter, we had 2 months where, you know, nobody goes out really. So we'd be the only boat the whole day. Well, guess what? We had 20 opportunities to hit browns. But if we would have pressure, we probably would have 5 opportunities. So to answer your question, you know, you'll have 5 good chances at 5 fish over 20 inches running streamers on it like it's, let's say, a 10-mile float. You'll have that many chances. Now, you will probably land 2. You'll land, and you'll probably lose your first 3. But here's what's good. If you get it to a point where you're hooking like a 19-inch brown on a streamer, you know, and you get maybe 2 of those in before you get your chance at your big one, then, you know, you're pretty much set up for your big one because you understand how to hook them, how to play them, what to do. If you've never done it before, you're going to lose probably 90% of what you hook. And a lot of it is because when you're casting and you're running, you're stripping these streamers, you're not going to expect the hit. It's good if you can see the hit. So like if you start to turn one and he's moving and you're getting ready, you can really prepare for that hook set. But if you're not seeing the hook set, you're just blind stripping and he buckles you, you're probably going to lose that fish. Unless you have a good instinct on hooking fish. If you don't, and you're in the middle of a strip and he hooks you, you're not probably going to get him. And you know, like, I can't say that I've had any client and they've had opportunities, their first fish they hooked was 25 inches. I've never had a client catch one and land it like that. Because, especially if they're new, because they don't know what they're doing. So, to be a good streamer fisherman, you know, it's going to take you probably 5 times of floating a river, dialing in your cast, and knowing how to strip, stuff like that, to really start fine-tuning your presentations, because you're just going to go through the whole trial and error of doing it. You're going to be throwing big rods, 9-weight, 8 weights. If you're not familiar with casting those kind of rods, you're only stuck with 6 weights. And you're used to setting like a nymph, you know, set up like that. That's another thing, guys. When you're stripping these, that's another thing a lot of people do is when they're stripping and they don't know how, they don't set with the same kind of force you do when you're nymph fishing. When you nymph fish, you just, you know what I mean? It's a little hook. You don't need to do much. So they'll come with that same instinct to do that when streamer fishing. They'll go, but you can't do that. You got to really bury them. And here's why. Let's say you don't get a good hook set. If you get enough penetration and that hook is a little through his mouth, you can give him a lot of tension, right? And he won't get off. Because you've got too much tension that's applied to that fish for him to shake it. The only way he'll be able to do that is if you give. And that's what a lot of people do too, is they play a fish like they're fishing a nymph setup. So when you're playing a nymph, you know, you tug a war gang, you know, when he's done, you strip. When he's not, you give. Totally different. It's like bass fishing. When you get that fish in, I mean, you've got 20-pound test or 15-pound test, you've got to horse that fish in. There is no giving him any break. Don't let him run. See, I know a lot of clients they'll let that fish play, they'll give him some slack, that fish is gone. And if you keep them like, it's weird. Sometimes I can set, like we hooked a fish. Let me see if I can show you this fish we hooked.